Good afternoon and welcome to the Senate Committee on Government Operations. Today is Thursday, February 4th, 3 p.m. We are in conference room 16 with members of the committee and the public joining remotely via video conference. I'm Sharon Moriwaki, chair of the committee, and joining me today remotely is Senator Stanley Chang, aloha, and Senator Mike Gabbard, aloha. I think that's all I see of the committee. And before proceeding with the hearing, the chair would like to make a few housekeeping announcements. This hearing is being streamed live on YouTube. You can find links to viewing options for all Senate meetings on the live and on-demand video page of the legislature's website. In the unlikely event that we encounter major technical difficulties during today's hearing and must end it abruptly, the committee will reconvene to discuss any outstanding business on Tuesday, February 9th in this conference room, 16, and via video conference. In order to accommodate everyone who registered to testify remotely today, we will be limiting testimony to 2 minutes each. The agenda today includes 7 bills, all of which are addressing procurement of goods, services, and construction. So we shall proceed. The first bill on the agenda is SB 788, relating to procurement. This bill requires that past performance be considered in bid selection of contractors for certain contracts. It requires procurement officers to consider past performance, conduct past performance evaluations, and maintain records of past evaluation. Our first testifier is Bonnie Kahukai, Acting Administrator of the State Procurement Office. Bonnie, aloha, welcome. Members, questions of Ms. Kahukai?
I have a question.
Senator Gabbard.
Yes, Bonnie, will these evaluations, will they be made public or are they kept confidential?
Okay, the intent is to make it available.
Information. was supposed to be developed so that when we go out to bid, the state goes out to bid, we would have information on the performance of these contractors. So it gives you more information on what these contractors are like when you're actually going out to bid. So if they had poor performance, you would think twice about putting them on your list if you were to use them for a project. So I have a couple of questions. One, Bonnie, so these consultants you use, they actually did the groundwork and you already have rules that you developed, but you haven't executed, is that correct? Would be available, and you're saying that you needed some appropriation so that database would be available on an ongoing basis for all state agencies who are contracting for those kinds of services. Is that correct?
That's
Asking for is that do you have that amount, and what is it for? To create the database, execute the rules?
correct.
One final question. If you got this funding, how long would it take for you to execute? What's the timeline? Questions? Okay, thank you, Bonnie. Let's move on to the comptroller, Kurt Otaguro and Dags.
Good afternoon, Chair,
Good
Vice Chair, and
morning.
members
Good
of the
afternoon.
committee. Kurt Otaguro, State Comptroller. Department of Accounting and General Services stands by its testimony, although I appreciate the update from Administrative Kahukai regarding her future plans to past performance and how to solidify that.
Okay, next we have We have written testimony from David Rodriguez from Department of Transportation and Walter Billingsley in support, and then we have Walter Billingsley in opposition from the City Department of Design and Construction, and in person, remotely, Tim Lyons from the Subcontractors Association. Is Mr. Lyons available? No? Okay, he had some comments that, I think, okay, well, let's just move on, and see if he comes in for something else. But, I do have comments and in support of having, this past performance, information available. I think just for Comptroller, I do have some questions because you were in opposition to the performance data system, and I was just wondering what your concerns might be, because the Comptroller, I think, was involved in the task force in creating this system where you would get information on evaluating all your contracts so that you would go forward in a more cost-effective way and look at contractors who did not come in on budget, on time, or performed well. So I wanted to get your reasoning for being opposed to this, for documenting performance.
Yes, thank you, Senator. The DAGS is really looking at the language within the bill, SB 788, and based on what we see in the bill, we believe that legislation was not necessary because of the current procurement code already allowing for the process to consider past performance, and it contains various mechanisms in which we can already implement to do the performance. The bill didn't necessarily say a creation of a database, but with regard to past performance, there's no question that everyone in the state wants to make sure that all projects go on time and on budget, and to hold people accountable. I believe that a database is good, and it will provide that kind of consolidation of information so long as the procedures, as Bonnie indicated, have the proper screening so that we ensure that the information is accurate and current, and maintained, and that will require additional resources, obviously, to do that. But it's really, as we've learned and as we all know, the State Procurement Office can already debar poor performers and contractors. It's a matter of documentation, and it's a matter of enforcement. And I believe that we can do a better job as a state, as a procuring agency, as well as in the construction area, or any project for that matter, to have a stronger enforcement aspect. And to do that, we need to make sure that we have the proper documentation, obviously, in the contract written correctly. But more importantly, in a construction project, we have a mechanism called liquidating damages that penalize a contractor based on their agreement if they don't meet certain performance clauses. That liquidating damage is a financial mechanism, and so having higher liquidating damages to make it worth the while so that you get the attention of a contractor is certainly another mechanism that we should consider implementing, as well as change orders. So past performance can go two ways, not to back any contractor, but sometimes we may not be as clear on our requirements in the beginning. Some of it is probably not due to negligence, but certainly due to the emergence of a project when it first starts. And so as you build something, depending on what the nature of the project is, it could be very specific or it could be evolving, and that would require change orders that add complexities. There's other aspects in past performance, as you know, we're unable to detect certain aspects in the beginning. We have a certain project in the Liliha area that is one such thing. The project called for renovation, a pretty straightforward renovation, but come to find out, there's a ground underground under the library, specifically that is wet, that there's running water, the ground is unstable, and you only uncovered that while you're doing the renovations. And so certain things how do you hold a contractor accountable for certain things? Now, there's consultants that also add to the problem, and so the problem gets more complex as you look at fault and to determine that. And so all we're saying is that we believe that the current legislation has those mechanisms in place to protect the state from poor performers. Now,
So let me ask you, Comptroller, so do you now, for every contract, as it's going through, do that so that you assess? I'm not only thinking of this as only poor performers or where you're going to go after them, but even good performers, just looking at performance. Are they on budget? Are they coming in on time? How many change orders do they have? Was the performance satisfactory? So it's, you're not having flooding or whatever to the building. Do you do that now on every contract? The evaluation of the project, not for bid, but just knowing what the performance of each contractor is. Do you do that now?
Sure. And in fact, I know we have our Public Works Administrator on as well. She can explain her process, but the answer is yes. And it's clear because we pick great consultants and great projects, and the process does work, as you know, because we on time and on budget, we have very successful projects.
So I think that's the idea of this, to have it available not only just for your agency, but to share it across the board. That's what the data system is for. And I'd like to have a copy of your evaluation so that we can look at that going forward, because I think this is one of the issues that people have brought up, that we're getting poor contractors and we're not doing the good contractors. So I'd like to have a copy of that record as well. But you see what I'm getting at is that information, the data is what we're talking about, not so much that we're penalizing anybody, that it should be very accurate data. So as people, as the agencies are going out for bid, that they know where you have information that contracts haven't been performed. And so it's also a deterrent. If you know that it's going to be published among the state agencies, you're going to do a darn good job when you do get a contract. So I think it goes both ways.
Yes, as we discussed previously, Senator, the advent of an e-procurement system and the ability for us to add more data and actually even rate performance online, and it could be formal, could be informal. However we need to structure this is very valuable. It's like what we do in our daily lives using Amazon, and the first thing you look at are the stars and how other people have commented. Right. And so I am absolutely in support of data that provides insights so that further investigation can go on. But yeah, the more data we have.
So in that regard, Comptroller, in looking at the data and having good data, both on good performers and bad performers, so that we have accurate data when we're going to bid on any project, if that is important, would you oppose that? I mean, I guess I'm looking at, you're saying it's the language, and we can always fix that as we look at, there's another bill, 1017, that has some data, and it's very objective data that can be collected at or during a project. Would you be opposed to that, or is that something that, if you've looked at 1017, we will come to that in this hearing? But I think we're looking at information going forward.
We're all in support of providing data. It's just a matter of what data and how we conclude that, because you want to remain, the data is really the integrity of the information, the data. So the more
Agreed.
objective, the more subjective it gets, that becomes problematic. And that's where the subjectivity creates bid protests. I mean, so it's really spending more time with procurement and others to really get to what is objective and how we minimize the subjective aspect when the data gets into that database. And I think that's really the point we're trying to make. We can create a database and all kind of stuff, right? But if it's not good data, then it won't serve the purpose.
So we'll come back to that question in a bill in 2017, I think, yeah, and which looks at the data sets, and you can assess that. Thank you, Comptroller. Anybody else, any other persons wanting to ask questions of any of the testifiers? Okay, let's see. We have, let's see. Oh, okay, Tim Lyons is on. Tim, did you want to testify on SB 788, I think? Was that, we're going to go back? On past-
Well, you have our written testimony, and I think that will suffice.
Oh, okay.
And we would concur with, I believe, most of the remarks made by the comptroller as well on this issue.
On the past. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify on this measure? Okay, let's move on then to SB 789. And this is relating to special procurement process for new or unique requirements or technologies, directs the Procurement Policy Board to establish rules on procedures for the use of special procurement process. And the head of the purchasing agency is required to prepare a procurement plan, submit a plan to the Attorney General, and electronically post public notice of special procurement contracts within 7 days of the contract award. First testifier is Bonnie Kahukai, Acting Administrator for the State Procurement Office. Bonnie?
Good afternoon again, Senator Chair. We don't have any issues with this bill except for the portion that says that absent full competition, the basis of the procurement code is open and fair competition. So therefore, we would recommend that wording be taken out and replaced by through competition as practicable under the circumstances. Thank you.
Okay, questions, members? Okay, the next testifier is, let's see, is it David? David Rodriguez is in support, and that's written testimony. Kathy Betts, Director of Department of Human Services, with comments, written comments. Anyone else wishing to testify? Okay. Members, questions? All right, moving on to SB 1017. And this is what we were talking about. It's also past performance and other issues in this bill. It implements the recommendations of the Procurement Policy Review conducted by the State Procurement Office in 2016, and specifically past performance database, negotiations with contractor bids above the state estimate, and disclosure of subcontractor information on bids. So I'm going to call on Ms. Kahukai again to start us off. Bonnie?
State Procurement Office stands by its written testimony. We do, as I said, we did draft some procurement rules already, and in those, many of the recommendations are already included. We also took a look at the federal performance evaluation guide and took the information from there as well. And it is intended to be as objective as possible, with ability to make references or to make comments when there are disputes or there are some challenges with their evaluation. Thank you.
So do you have any other additions to your testimony? Because this bill is quite extensive. It relates to past performance, but also has some of the other recommendations that were made by your procurement task force in terms of the subcontractor bids, and also estimates, negotiation with estimates above what the state estimate is for jobs. Did you have anything to add to those other parts of this bill?
Actually, we were not as specific as recommended in the bill. We were more generalized. Request information would be a standard qualification questionnaire, and it would include such things as financial ability to deliver the goods, materials, references for determination, and those kinds of things. Again, we are taking most of this from the federal guidelines. In addition, we did ask for a rating system. For example, a negative rating would mean the contractor did not meet significant contract requirements. We also allow for a neutral rating. The contractor met significant contract requirements, and exceeded rating, positive rating, then contractor met all significant contract requirements and exceeded contract requirements in one or more areas. So we did include those as well.
Okay. Thank you. Questions, members? Thank you, Bonnie. Comptroller, up next.
Yes, Chair. Department of Accounting and General Services stands on its written testimony.
Okay, I do have a question. If you look at Part 3, you talked about needing more objective information in a performance review. And if you look at Section 5 on page 4, it lists all of the information that would be required in this past performance, or in performance review. It's not performance, it's really performance review, and you look at it, as past performance when you actually assess it if you have contracts coming up to bid. But it's pretty specific in terms of information to be included in this database: the name, date, size of the project, description of the project, the managing employees, whether the project was timely completed or not, the project's authorized budget, and the positive or negative difference between the final cost of the project and the project's authorized budget, if any. So those are the kinds of information which seem to me quite objective, and I wanted to know whether you still objected to getting data of this kind for us to have in our database, and that, as you heard from the Chief Operating Officer, she said that you would have the time as you're evaluating as the purchasing agency, time for the contractor to also respond as in terms of the example you gave. It wasn't us. We found, there were other kinds of things underground that, that caused the delay. But having that opportunity to insert that into the evaluation, would you then be still opposing having such a system that collects that kind of information?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As I mentioned before, we would be in total support of a database. There's no question that the collection of information across the state for multiple projects make total sense, and to have that consistency and to have it conveniently located in a single area. The only challenge, and something that we all need to work on, again, going back to the subjectivity of certain statements made, my understanding is there's a lot more to why things get delayed than meets the eye. And so we just need to be fair to both consultants and contractors. You mentioned the cost, and there's always criticism about low bid. The statute already, the procurement law already allows for that to go to the second bidder, lowest bid. But some of these things are problematic in my humble opinion because the bidder already knows what the appropriation is at the aggregate amount. And so once you start going into a different direction, the second and third bidders understand what margin they have to play with, whether they value engineer a project or not to meet our budget. So to me, the performance is based on the quality of the work and meeting those objectives that we have. There are very objective things that you did state, Senator, and absolutely those have to go through. All I think we're saying is we need to really convene and understand that gray area where it gets a little more subjective so that we can consistently have the same information inputted into this database, which would be of value.
Okay, thank you, Comptroller. So we move on to Greg Sarakaku from the Plumbing and Mechanical Contractors Association of Hawaii. Opposed? I think it's written testimony. Tim Lyons from the Subcontractors Association of Hawaii. Tim?
Comment on the past performance issue, which is section 5 of the bill, and it applies to all of the bills on past performance. Under item number 1, the very last one, which is item H, it asks for the positive and negative difference between the final cost of the project and the authorized budget. And we don't have a problem with that at all. We just think you should add to that the reasons, therefore. The next sub-items 2 and 3 allow for the contractor to say something about the results, but I guess in our opinion, why should you wait? Just go ahead and ask for what those reasons were to begin with. If you don't like the explanation, then you can go forward. I guess our biggest issue has to do with, of course, Part 5 of the bill, which is a recommendation from the consultants on the subcontractor listing clause to get rid of the nature and scope. So in other words, right now, when the general contractor submits his bid, he lists all the subs that have given him prices that he intends to use on that particular project. The consultant seemed to think that because of a lot of protests, the way to do that is get rid of nature and scope. So in other words, all you're going to do is just list the name of the sub. We have provided you on page 3 of our testimony a sample of the current information that the agency receives for nature and for the listing of the subs. And you'll note on there that it lists the sub's name and then lists the type of work that he's going to do. On the right is the proposal of just listing the name of the contractor. So the question comes up as an example on our example is you'll notice that contractor Dorvan Lays is listed 3 times because they plan on doing 3 different types of work. If you get rid of nature and scope, it doesn't really tell you anything. And what do you do with somebody like El Coco, who I have no idea what they are either, but what do you do with somebody like that when it's a name that you don't even know and it's not very descriptive of the type of sub work that they are going to be doing? It really tells you nothing. So, to us, it seems like what the consultant said is listing this information is causing protests, so the way to do it is just don't tell anybody what people are going to do and they won't have any information to protest. And we don't think that's a very smooth transition to try to handle the issue. The problem, and we have to go back a little bit, the problem with the subcontractor listing is that general contractors are the source of work for subcontractors. And when a general contractor provides a subcontractor with 20, 30, 40 million dollars worth of work a year, he, needless to say, has a fair amount of leverage over particular subcontractors. So the reason the subcontractor listing law exists is to stop bid shopping and bid peddling. Everyone, including the consultant, including the general contractors, has said that yes, it's been effective in doing that. So there's been no reason to get rid of that. We're not sure what we accomplish by getting rid of nature and scope, other than dilute the clause so much that it renders it useless. And if it's useless, then obviously you don't have anything to protest. So people have tried to work out a solution on this issue for several years. We just want to make sure the subs who are economically disadvantaged in this situation are protected. And so short of, we don't agree with getting rid of the nature and the scope, so we cannot agree with the inclusion of Part 5 in this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. The next testifier is Ryan Sakuda with the General Contractors Association of Hawaii. Aloha.
Aloha, Chair Moriwaki. Ryan Sakuda on behalf of the General Contractors Association. We'd like to stand on our written testimony providing comments with the suggested amendment. I'd like to note that the intent of this measure is to adopt the recommendations of the Procurement Policy Review conducted pursuant to HR 142. Our suggested amendment is based on a suggestion from that review, and it can be found on page 114. Thank you for your time, and I'll be available for questions.
Thank you. Any questions, members? We'll come back to you. The next is, both of these are written testimonies giving comments. Al Itamoto from the Electrical Contractors Association of Hawaii, and Richard Heltzel with the Healy Tibbetts Builders Incorporated. Are there any other persons who want to testify on this? Any questions, members? Well, I do. I have one for Mr. Sakuda. You heard from Mr. Lyons that the subcontractors feel that they would be disserviced if we took out the language of nature and scope, which they feel protects their interests in bids, because they're at the mercy of the general contractor. And you are on the other opposite side of that, wanting to take it out. Can you address that concern that they have, that there would be, they would be not this bid shopping for subs, and how might we look at a way of addressing that?
Yeah, I think we both can agree that we are not for bid shopping. So one of the suggestions, if you look at the review, was that you look at California, that was in page 114. Basically, they're saying that 45% of all the protests in the state received are alleged defects in the listing of subcontractors. So they want to cure this. And so by doing this, they're saying maybe we should look at California's law, which allows 24-hour amendments to the subcontractors listing. We're okay if you want to leave in the nature of the scope, but just give us the time. And one way to prevent the bid shopping is just don't open the bids for the 24 hours. You can't change the price. So we still want to, I think we're on the same page where we want to prevent bid shopping.
So the big problem is these, as you say, minor technical issues that can be corrected. You can keep the bill closed for 24 hours. You can make those corrections, and then you don't have this.
But just like,
sort of,
they make a clerical error on the license number.
Okay. So I have an amendment from Mr. Lyons. If we were to keep the nature and scope, but you're saying you're fine with keeping the nature and scope in, is that in lieu of that, if you had language that each joint contractor or subcontractor shall submit a bid acknowledgement form, a bid acknowledgement form, attesting to the contractor's compliance with the contractor licensing laws and rules of Chapter 444 HRS. He has a penalty for not doing it, but we won't go there. Just in terms of if you had each contractor list all the subs and their license, and that they have an active license, and in fact that they are in compliance, that they can do the scope of work, not necessarily list the scope of work. Would that be something that would be better than, or should we just keep the nature and scope? Look, I'm asking the general contractors.
Well, I think the issue is the more things that are required, the more things that can be protested on, right? We're okay with the requirements if we are given some time to actually make
Correct.
some amendments just to clarify technical errors to reduce the amount of bid protest.
Okay. Okay, very good, all right.
We get a lot of things come in last minute and we don't have, the proper time it takes to actually verify everything. And that's when you get the high amount of bid protest that slows everything down and increase costs.
Any other comments, questions, members? Okay, well, thank you very much. We will move on to Senate Bill 1035. First up is Ms. Kahukai. Bonnie?
Good afternoon, Senator. The pandemic has forced the state governments to digitize their process, which up to now has been a very manual process. SBO is leveraging a tried and true tested business model that is funded through a vendor-collected admin fee, which we already do with our existing small purchase e-procurement system. In addition, this fee would assist in paying for an automated system to assure statewide access for a full-term life cycle. If passed, the bill would authorize a special fund and allows the SBO to charge an admin fee to be used for the project management of the procurement automation system, and also to pay for a special procurement officer. The original bill did not include a special procurement officer. So what this request is asking is for a special procurement officer with legal background to assist the state procurement officer, to assist the state procurement office to address issues relating to legislation, to training, to conforming roles, to federal grant terms, and also to assist with standard templating of forms and procedures, which will be crucial to an automated system. Also will address legal research and opinions and a whole list of related issues. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Bonnie. Questions, members? Okay, next, Comptroller Otaguro from DAGS.
Yes, Chair, thank you for the opportunity. Department of Accounting and General Services stands on its written testimony.
Okay, thank you. David Rodriguez from Department of Transportation. Written comments from David Rodriguez, and also written comments in support from Melissa Pavlicek, both of them in support. I just have one question of you, Bonnie. We are having a budget deficit here, and you're asking for a position. I know that they're all going to be paid from the special fund, but this position, if you don't get it, you also have the position providing other services as well. Is that going to be a problem in activating this e-procurement system?
It won't halt it, but it will certainly slow it down, because then we will have to depend solely on the AG to assist us with some of these issues, especially the AG's terms and conditions and formatting templates, so that it doesn't have to go to the AG's office every single time. It would be a standard format that would be pre-approved unless there were exceptions to the terms that the agency wished to include.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to Senate Bill 1207, and this is relating to emergency procurements. It adds emergency conditions under which an agency can go forward with faster procurements for equipment failures and so forth, and also for new services, new and I guess unique services that the state may be facing, as we did in this pandemic. It also replaces the chief procurement officer approval with just an accounting report to the legislature.
Or and DOT strongly support.
So, Acting Administrator Kahakui.
Thank you, Senator. The SBS provided you with white paper, court cases from other states, and benchmarking from other states addressing the issues of emergency procurement. And in all states that have adopted the ABA Model Procurement Code, emergencies are narrowly defined as it is in our code. The heads of the departments already have the ability to manage their emergencies immediately, and there is a centralized place to report their emergencies that will be transparent. Expanding the emergency definition to allow for repairs, equipment failures, will result in a contradiction in the code whose basis is open and fair competition. The federal government has strict provisions for emergencies. No day-to-day emergencies are recognized by the federal government. There are alternatives to expanding the definition of emergency. IDIQ contracts to address repairs in time of urgent needs. Sole source if the single vendor must be used due to capability and compatibility issues. Exemptions. Currently, CPOs cannot exempt construction. We would recommend that the statute be changed to allow for exemptions for construction when it is not practical or advantageous to engage in full competition. The authority and oversight must reside with the Chief Procurement Officer. Decision-making by the CPO means there's a central repository for documentation supporting the decision to the exception to competition. It is one place, auditors and other interested parties to find out data about these types of procurements, including their justifications. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have the Comptroller, Otaguro.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair. Department of Accounting and General Services stands on its written testimony in support of SB 1207. What I'd like to add and I highly respect our Chief Procurement Officer, Bonnie Kahukai, and her statements. I just want to offer a little color with regard to the practical aspect of having the CPO, the Chief Procurement Officer, have the ultimate say. The example that I will cite, well, there's two that come to mind. Some of these emergencies are never planned, obviously, and they happen right away. Others may, like a hurricane or a tidal wave coming, you can plan for that. And two cases come to mind were the fires that happened on Maui specifically, and the airports division needed to take action really quickly. And you're talking about minutes to procure things and using a purchasing card on top of that. And so in those kind of situations, the bureaucracy of the state needs to step aside so that staff can address the issue right away. Another example that comes to mind is what happened, the unfortunate incident at the Pali Highway and with the landslide. And the Chief Procurement Officer did in fact issue the DOT highways the ability to hire somebody to move the mud off the highway. However, the second step, which was not the immediate need, but an urgent need, was to hire a consultant to go up on the mountain to assess the structural integrity of the side of the mountain and to determine whether it's safe or not to open up the highway. And that's where we had an issue, and I believe Highways had an issue where the CPO said that's not an emergency. And so there again, you have difference of opinions when the urgency is such where you need to delegate that authority to the staff that's on the ground handling the emergency as it's fluid. And so I understand completely what State Procurement Office is saying, but the reason why we fully support this is because there are certain circumstances that we cannot allow the state bureaucracy to get in the way of resolving an issue. Thank you for that opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Questions of the comptroller? Okay, so next up is, we have the Director of Transportation, Jay Butai.
Thank you, Chairman Moriwaki and members of the committee, Jay Butai for DOT. We stand on our testimony in strong support. The bill proposes to replace the Chief Procurement Officer approval with an accounting report to the legislature within 60 days after the end of the fiscal year in which the procurement was made. On our testimony, we've noted, in 2018 and 2019, we had 19 emergency procurements, and in 2020, we were under emergency proclamation, so the 103D was thrown out of the window. However, even under the emergency, we still complied with 103D to the extent possible. And, I just want to echo what the comptroller said, because sometimes when you have an emergency, we still try to maintain a record of the management of the procurement, and we document the basis for determining why the emergency exists. And I think the people on the front line kind of understand the situation best, so they have a much better understanding and more informed about the reality of the situation, so they can make the fastest and better informed decision. When we of the 19 emergency procurements, there were 6 that was disapproved by the comptroller, but not the comptroller, the Chief Procurement Officer. I mean, we eventually, we paid up eventually, but not before the unpaid invoices drain away the healthy cash flow and goodwill of the vendor. Then it puts us in a bind, because the next time we need their services, they may not want to have anything to do with us. So, we have to scramble and find someone else who may not be as good. So the late payments not only affect the cash flow of the vendor, but also the ongoing relationship. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I do have a question. You heard from the Chief Procurement Officer and her concerns about competitive bidding and following 103D requirements of competitive bidding that, she would like to see somewhere in your process. When you do have these, and as she gave us the other option, IBD, I don't know the acronyms of, the indefinite, what IDQ, anyway, you know what I'm talking about.
The contract or
So you do the
indefinite,
first, you get all of those who qualify to
IDIQ.
use, yeah. So is that something that would address it, or emergency is emergency and you get what you can, but what kinds of safeguards can you say would be in place for these emergencies so that you can give some assurances to the Chief Procurement Officer that, you don't have to have all of these rules in place when you have an emergency?
Well,
What was your
the
appreciation?
challenge in emergency procurement is, we're trying to prioritize the protection of life, public, health and safety. And, while at the same time, we want to avoid the cumbersome and, and what the comptroller said about the bureaucratic procedures.
I'm thinking in
but
terms
we
of
don't
your
have-
process, what is your process in terms of getting that vendor to do that job? I think that's where the CPO would come in and say, is this fair? You're not just giving it to your friend, what is that process so that if, there's that understanding of emergency is emergency, but we're still doing it fairly, finding the vendor, the contractor.
I mean, like I said, when even though it's an emergency, we must still comply with 103D to the extent possible. Because if you know what's going to happen, that's why it's an emergency. I mean, you have no crystal ball, and when you have these emergencies, it's not like they come with a, you know where it's going to happen and when it's going to happen. It's it's an urgent situation, and we need to take care of the problem. But like I said, I mean, we document the basis for the emergency, and we maintain a record of the emergency. The name of the vendor, the amount of and type of the contract. And also, I think a list of people, vendors we contacted to address the emergency.
So this bill eliminates the CPO completely from the process. But if we include the CPO at the tail end, on the other side, I think this bill makes you report to the legislature. But I would feel comfortable if the report went to the CPO as well, so that if there were any problems, at least there'd be some review, post-audit review of how the process or how the contract was let. Would that be a problem?
No, there's no problem, but it's just like I said, in terms of the, when we process the payment, so that we want we want to pay the contractor so that, they don't think we're chronic late payers. Because like I said, we paid up eventually, because once an emergency, we still gotta pay after the fact. But where it gets dicey for us is when the vendor and trying to collect the unpaid invoices.
No, but
And
if
they're
it's
telling us-
just a reporting, it's not an approval. It's a reporting to. as you
We're
report
fine with
to
the reporting, Senator.
Thank you, Jay. Back to Bonnie. Bonnie, is she still on?
I'm still here.
Oh, okay, so if we put you back in this process to report to you, so that at least if there were any problems, you could talk with the department, but it's not an approval process, but at least they know that somebody is working with them if there were any discrepancies or any problems, that you would be there to assist and look over. Would that suffice in this emergency situations?
I would amend it to say that we would, if we were going to get a report, not wait to the end of the 60 days after the fiscal year. That it be done immediately after when the award is made, and not wait till so long, so we can take corrective action. If we see repeated problems, we can address it right away. And we also would want it to be posted as an award, so that it is open and transparent, so that everyone can see these are the things that DOT, DAGS, whoever it is conducting these emergency type procurements.
But you understand the situation, when it's an emergency, they have to move fast within minutes sometimes. And in the instance that the comptroller talked about, it was an emergency. They had to prevent another emergency. So if you just ran by the book, you'd say, oh no, go out for a bid again. But this was most cost effective and beneficial to the state to do the two jobs at once. So not so much the approving of it, but seeing and understanding that.
Right now, we do approve it, but 99% of the time, it's reported after the fact. So they've already addressed the emergency, and now they're coming in, the way the current operation works, they take care of the emergency, they address the emergency, and then they come in for an approval to basically make payment. So if you're going to allow this bill to move forward, then we would just say that you still need to address the emergency as you have done in the past, but report it to us after the fact, and not wait till the end of the fiscal year so that we can follow your progress or follow these emergencies right away. And if we notice a pattern of non-compliance, then we can address it with the department to say, hey, we see that you're doing all of these emergencies and maybe they're not so much emergencies and you need to take, alternative action. So we're not so far down the road that they now have to go back, or we can catch it right away, is basically what I'm saying. Not approving it, if that's what the legislature does, but reporting to us, and we can take a look at it, just to see this is the kinds of things that they are using this emergency language for.
Okay, thank you. Members, questions? Okay, thank you very much, all of you. We're going to move on to Senate Bill 1329, which addresses time limits to resolve protests to awards of competitive sealed bids, as well as proposals and procurement of special services. Members, we have Senator Donna Kim here to join us. Thank you. Ooh, we have 30 minutes left. Oh, yep, okay. All right, so first up would be Bonnie again.
Good afternoon, Senators, again. So our just concern is if we have a specific time period in here, it may be problematic for procurements or solicitations that are very complex, and would it result in a rushing to judgment? Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go through and get everybody on, and then we'll ask some questions. Comptroller Otaguro?
Yes, Chair. Department of Accounting and General Services stands by written testimony in opposition for the same reasons that State Procurement Office stated.
Is Director Butai still on, or David Rodriguez?
I'm still on.
You're still on in support? Do you have?
Yes. Yeah, in support.
Okay.
We stand on our testimony in support.
Thank you. Tim Lyons from the Subcontractors Association of Hawaii. Tim? Oh, you have to unmute.
Thank you. We are also in support, Madam Chair, although we don't know the magic number as far as the number of days go, but we're in support of the concept.
Thank you. And Malcolm Barcarsey, as I'm pronouncing.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. We have our written testimony. We appreciate the committee, some informational briefing on Tuesday that brought our attention to this issue. And furthermore, we are concerned with the written testimony coming from DAGS. Our reading of the bill is we don't interpret delegation to an outside agency, rather it going through the delegation process from the State Procurement Office down to the agencies. So we would like to make that additional point. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions? Senator Kim?
Aloha, thank you very much. I guess for both Bonnie and Kurt, as far as rushing to judgment, we see time limits because there seems to be a lack of discipline as to how we deal with some of these procurements. So I think if we did a better job there, right now DCCA has 45 days, so they have a set period of time. I could see where if it was a complex, that there could be some mechanism that they could ask for an extension for reasonable cause and then have another set period of time. But as you will see in one of the recent procurements that was at transportation, the bid protest went in on June 29, and it was sent to Department of Transportation. And then the Department of Attorney General received DOT's request for advice on September 10th. So from June 29th to September 10th. And then the Department of Land Division researched the bid protest issues, and October 20th assigned a deputy to prepare a draft response from the DOT to assist in finalizing the response. On November, another 30 days, DOT provided additional information. Then additional comments with the client continued until December 18. December 21 returned a final draft of recommendation to the client. It wasn't until January 6, after I questioned the AG in a public hearing as to what was going on, why was it taking so long at the AG's office, that they finally sent it, and the protester requested that it would be adjudicated. And DCCA immediately did a hearing set the next week, and then they dismissed it for cause, or for whatever reasons they dismissed it, which acted quite quickly. But it took, like 70 days for DOT to send it to AG, and then it took AG another 2.5 months to deal with this. So, I mean, it's ridiculous that a protest and a procurement should take so long. In the meantime, the cash register is running. The cost is going to be eaten by us because it was a government contract. And so our taxpayers will be the one funding it, not to mention the private sector and, what kind of cost delays they have to deal with. So, I can understand the concerns, but we need to work together into how do we address this? Because one of the biggest reasons for an airport authority, they keep saying it's procurement. But the players are not going to change just because you have an airport authority. You're still going to have a protest. You're still going to have the AG. You're still going to have DCCA. And so none of that goes away.
So just following up on the Senator Kim's questioning, is what is your procedure? I mean, why is it taking those 6-7 months in the department? Because DCCA, as you heard on Tuesday, they can go through that case and they haven't missed a deadline yet of 45 days. So why is it taking so much longer in the department? What is the procedure? Bonnie, are you still there? It goes to you. The protest first goes to you as a chief procurement officer, yes?
No, it actually does not. I'm sorry. Good afternoon, Senator Skin. No, it does not. We delegated procurements down to the department heads. So it is not slowed down by coming to us first. It goes directly to the department heads of the agency that is involved in that. So they have immediate access and can respond immediately.
Okay, thank you. So let's go to, since Jade is still there, let's take that case, not going into detail, but why did it take so long in the department before it got sent up to DCCA for a review?
Not to Attorney General.
Because sometimes sometimes we have to address each piece of the, the procurement that the bid protester take issue. And then we got to seek legal counsel. And then we file a response, and then wait for the DCCA Office of Administrative Hearing to resolve the protest.
But if the DCCA can resolve it in 45 days, and they're quite remote from where the problem is in your department, why is it that a decision can't be made more immediately, at least the time frame the DCCA has, to get the information, because it's all there in front of you. And some of these that were dismissed that we've heard about had to do with, some technical error, and that could have been dismissed right at the start of the process. Who makes that determination? Do you do that, or where is that? Why is it taking long in the department?
Yeah, it's probably our project manager, Senator. It's not, I'm the one that signs the letter, but it's, I'm not the technical expert on but it's usually our manager, and they, back and forth communicate with the, with the vendors on what, if they have some questions about the bid. So they would, get, feedback and comments from, the winning bidder. And, so then we work with the AG to, come up with a response.
So Jade, do you folks look over these protests and see where the delays are and how you guys can manage it, and if the project manager or whoever overseeing this, because, Hans Phelps protested on June 29th, and DOT didn't go up to the Attorney General for advice until September 10th. So why would it take 70 days for them to seek advice from the AG? I mean, I know there's issues. I know you got to go back and forth. I know that, you folks have to do that. But, 70 days. And then the AG takes until January 6th, from September 10th to January 6th, to make a determination to send it to DCCA. Or to make a determination, and then the protester asked for administrative hearing.
Yeah, I don't really have a good answer, Senator, but let me, talk to my team and see where the bottleneck was on that particular bid protest.
Yeah, but I'm understanding from the private sector that this is not unique, that it happens all the time. So I think that if you can somehow put in dates and, ideally as to how long it should be taking, so that whoever's working on this know that, hey, I've got 2 weeks to work on this. And if they need an extension, fine, then they give some kind of reasonable reasons why. But to just have no end in sight, if I didn't ask for it in January, I don't know if this would have come out by now. And I kept calling. I've been calling about this from November, December, and then when the AG came before us, I brought it up. So, it's not as if this is, if nobody brought it up, I don't know where it would be.
So we saw the difference, and I think in some of your testimony, I don't know if it was Tim, that when the DCCA, the Office of Administrative Hearings, was given a deadline of 45 days, and they have never missed it since, they actually make it a priority. So perhaps some kind of deadline on the departments, because it will help the departments as well to speed up the process, to make a decision. It can be then appealed to the Office of Administrative Hearings. It can go faster. That, it will then give you an opportunity to get the information faster and get the AG's help faster than letting it lag on for 6 months, over 6 months. And that's, time is money, so that's the costs go up and the delays are bad. So thinking in terms of the taxpayer dollars and how we're using it to pay for delays instead of paying for jobs done. So maybe you should think about that, and we will as well on this bill, because I think it's an important bill in terms of speeding up delays, which are really unnecessary if it can be resolved faster. So maybe you could look at your process internally, and we will get back to you in terms of how we do this.
Can I just add, and it's not just you guys, it's the AG's office. So, there need to be deadlines for the AG's office to also respond, because, they have a lot of deputy AGs up there, and I can't understand why it would take them, 2 months to do that. It was not that complicated of a protest from what I saw.
Any other questions? Members, anybody remotely there with questions? Oh, here's Senator De La Cruz, Vice Chair.
Yeah.
Hello, yes.
Yeah. So I just had a question, I guess, for Jade or even the comptroller. The previous bill, they're asking for an expedited process. In this bill, now that they have timelines, they don't like the timelines. So I can't understand how we reconcile that if in one sentence they're saying, hey, we want it faster. And then now we have this bill, they're like, oh, we don't want the timeline though. So if they can explain to us how does that even make sense?
Good point.
Jay or Comptroller? Comptroller.
Yeah, Senator De La Cruz, good afternoon. Actually, I'd like Chris Kinimaka, our Public Works Administrator, to address it, but my understanding is, these protests are, you gotta have a knowledge of how we solicited it on the requirement, and so some of these are very case-specific. So I'm not against, and I don't think anybody would say that 70 days or 6 months to get action going is acceptable. It's clearly unacceptable. But I think what we're saying is that to have one deadline for all cases could be problematic, that's all. And so we got to describe it further, but I don't know if Chris wants to add on to the protest, because she handles it all the time.
Thank you, Comptroller. You're pretty much hitting the nail on the head that there's no one size fits all for protests. And I think our concern is that if there is a set date, that the date becomes the primary driver as opposed to doing the assessment and the evaluation appropriately. I will volunteer that it's not really apples to apples to compare how much time it takes DCCA to review a case versus what it takes for an agency to go through the review. Because by the time the case goes to the DCCA, both parties have already laid out all of their facts, all of their research. The reason it's going to the DCCA is because they didn't come to agreement. So all of that upfront work has been done. And for ourselves as well, even the simplest protest sometimes takes a lot of effort. And with the litigious environment that we're in, our contractors are becoming much more savvy and throwing the book at us.
Okay, I'm gonna have to cut us off because I've got one more bill and we've got a hard stop at 4:30.
All right.
I will get back to you if we look at how we're gonna resolve this in this bill.
Give us recommendations. If you think that this is 45 days is too short, then come up with something, because clearly 6 months is ridiculous.
So we will come back to you, but we will have to move on. Just one more bill. Thank you very much. I'm moving on to Senate Bill. Thank you, Senator. Senate Bill 1391. And this one is relating to the policy board, directing the policy board to look at some rules on defining and the procedures for life cycle costing of our big contracts. And I call on Bonnie again. Bonnie?
Good afternoon, Senator.
Hello.
The State Procurement Office stands on its written testimony and points out that life cycle costs should be considered when doing their source selection, especially when offers will include items that have substantially different operations, support, and/or disposal costs. But we also want to recommend amending the definition to match that's what is in with the National Institute of Government Purchasing, which is a nationally recognized and its membership. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bonnie. Comptroller, are you still there, Comptroller?
Yes, Accounting and General Services stands on its written testimony in opposition of the bill.
Thank you. I see Scott Glenn here, Chief Energy Officer. Scott, good afternoon.
Aloha, Chair. Good afternoon, Vice Chair and members of the committee. The Energy Office stands on its testimony and support, commenting on the energy experience with life cycle cost analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, I think is this a written testimony from Kevin Wong from KYD? Members, if anybody's still here, any questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. There's been so much discussion here today, and And I think there are a number of good ideas and suggestions that have come up. Some I might have to follow up with you. So I think today the chair will defer decision-making, and we will confer on Tuesday, February 9th at 3 p.m. here in this room 16 at the Capitol and remotely. So with that, I will let this meeting stand adjourned.
Okay, thank you for a good hearing, Senator Moriwaki. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting now.